Welcome back to the Smooth Brain Society. I am Sahir, and with me is Olivia. And and today, joining us all the way from London, United Kingdom, is Kasia Kostyrka-Allchorne. No,
Kostyrka-Allchorne, but great.
Kasia Kostyrka-Allchorne.
Allchorne, yes.
Okay.
Well done.
Okay,
Good
I've
attempt.
tried twice, and Kasia seems to be okay with it, so we'll move on. Just a little introduction. So, Kasia works at King's College London. She is the trial manager on the OPTIMA research program, which she will expand on a bit herself. The other program which she is part of is a program called DIORA, which stands for the dynamic interplay of online risk and resilience in adolescence. So there's two programs here, both of them which Kasia will expand on, and then we can go from there and see what we want to talk about and see where the conversation takes us. So welcome, Kasia.
Welcome. Thank you so much for the invitation, Sahir and Olivia. I'm delighted to be joining you for this conversation. Yes, I am involved in those two projects, research projects. And I think very broadly, they are about risks and opportunities of growing up in the digital age. And this is one of my main research interests. And I guess this is what we can probably talk about a bit today.
Awesome. So should we start off with how you even got interested in this type of work? So we'll do a little background and go from there.
Sure. So yes, I'm a research psychologist, developmental psychologist. So I have always been interested in, different aspects of children's development. And initially, during my PhD, this was the role of television editing. So the pace of television editing, how does it affect children's attention and inhibitory control? So this ability to withhold dominant answer. And I did some experimental research. Then after my PhD, I joined the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at King's College London, when I am now. And this was the time where I became a bit more interested in the potential effects of digital technology for young people's mental health, children's mental health, but also in terms of how we can harness the potential in digital technology to provide support for young people and their families. And this is what OPTIMA is about. So OPTIMA is a large program of research that is looking at a new mobile parenting support app for parents of children who are on the waiting list in clinical services. And being on the waiting list is the time that is really difficult for families and children. And those waiting lists are very long, at least in the UK now. So at this time, when they are on the waiting list, we are testing whether access to STEPS, which is this mobile phone app, could help to support parents with dealing with challenging behavior that they might see in their children.
Awesome. That sounds really interesting. So you not only look at sort of how to optimize technology, do you also sort of looked at how technology can be quite detrimental to young children? Is that the case?
So this is what DIORA is about. And in DIORA, we are looking at whether digital technology is linked to young people's mental health, adolescent mental health, both in positive and negative ways. And I think when you look at a lot of the literature that has been published, the focus is on the potential negative aspects of technology use. And I say very clearly potential, because most of this research is correlational. I don't think anyone has ever done a randomized control trial looking at, what happens. But not only there's a lot of this research, it takes a snapshot. So this is cross-sectional correlational literature that takes a snapshot of what happens in a given time and tries to explain what might be the potential effects. So I don't think we know what these are. I think we can observe certain relationships, but the focus is on the negative aspects of technology.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds really cool that you're sort of looking at the positive aspects as well. Maybe could you briefly run us through what those potential negative effects are, or the potential positive effects that there could be?
So I think in terms of our understanding of the literature is the potential negative effects is the inability to stop using technology. So it's this sort of addictive nature that some people refer to. And in fact, we did a recent review looking at young people who have a diagnosis of a mental health disorder and how they use technology and what sort of potential negative sides they might experience. And one of those that was clear across the different disorders was the inability to control their online use. And when you think about how technology is designed, it is designed to keep us hooked. Young people are asked to send snap streaks, they are coming back to social media to see how many likes they have received and so on. So, and what the literature suggests is that actually this is one of the potential downsides, and it might impact people's sleep. It might impact, how they eat. They might not do their homework. So there is a lot of, it's not just directly their mental health, but it might also impact other aspects of their daily life. Can I ask quickly, could we pause? Because I'm at home and my dog, I think, just went to the door, so I might have a paddle. If we
Sure.
Of course, yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
I'll be back in 2 minutes. Sorry about that.
Oh, good. Welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry about this. Okay, so we were talking about the potential negative effects and the inability to control usage. So that's one. The other, I guess, potential negative aspect is, sorry, my fault escaped me. So some young people might engage in risky behaviors online. So, for example, they might post things that are designed to attract likes or social feedback, because especially teenagers are looking at peer acceptance, belonging. So they might engage in more risky behaviors, post content that they otherwise wouldn't post. Or they might also heavily curate how they represent their lives online. So, for example, might delete posts that don't attract much feedback to appear more popular online than they are. That is really difficult. Also for peers, for young people who are watching or viewing content that appears popular, there's that feeling that everyone is living a better life than they are. That might lead to very uncomfortable feelings as well. So that's potentially another more negative aspect of digital technology. I'm sorry, I just realized I thought my Outlook was switched off. I think it is now.
Cool. And what were some of those positive aspects as well? I imagine they sort of flow into the building of the app.
So in terms of positive aspects is that having sense of belonging, connection with other people, and I guess we all experienced it, from 2020 to 2021, when that was probably one of the only ways where we could maintain some form of social life. But it is really important for young people to be able to connect with peers. I think also what's important, and especially in terms of thinking about interventions and help for mental health difficulties, it allows, whether it's young people or parents, to access help in a stigma-free way, because it's quite discreet not many people need to know. People might be more inclined to be open online, but also it can help to overcome certain physical barriers that people might encounter if they are seeking help. And obviously, in terms of the services that might be providing help this way, it allows to deliver them at large scale, at a relatively low cost, and with little human support, which is very important in terms of resource allocation. So there's a lot of potential. I think it's all about the balance, really.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. I'm also wondering what these interventions look like. I imagine they'd be quite different from like in-person interventions.
Yes, so steps. So this is the app that we are testing in the OPTIMA program. It has been it's been inspired by the in-person parenting support intervention called the New Forest Parenting Program. So it sort of takes the key principles from the New Forest Parenting Program, and it's quite intensive and it's quite structured. So it's composed of 8 steps. Because parenting skills sort of build up on top of each other, and parents have to complete these steps in a fixed order. So they have a very clear structure how to progress through the app. And most of parents like it, but some would like to go straight to the content that they find most interesting to them naturally. The other sort of features of the app that help to engage parents is the fact that everything is delivered in very short bursts, so bite-sized pieces, and parents can dip in and out from the app. And again, that helps them to engage, but also makes it much more accessible. So rather than go to a parenting support class for an hour, they can just use the app for 3 minutes and get some important information or learn new skills that they can try with their child. And they can access it at any time, at any place. So, you can imagine a parent waiting for a child after school or boiling a kettle for a cup of tea. They can just take the app out of their, take the phone out of their pocket, try the app. So it requires much less sort of logistics effort to get that support. What we also have in the Steps app are buddies. So buddies are parents who are played by actors, and they present stories that are based on real clinical cases. And this is the feature of the app that allows to create that sense of shared experience, because buddies share their stories, parenting struggles, challenges, but also sort of ideas that they have used to overcome these. And that's one of the elements of the app that parents who used it, they found quite helpful to hear from someone else. And this comes back to that sense of shared connection and understanding. That is potentially one of the very positive sides of digital technology.
Can I very quickly ask then, why do you use actors in the buddy system? Are there, as opposed to other parents sharing, who are willing to share their stories?
I think this is sort of more of a practical solution. The app is produced professionally, and one, I guess, to perhaps protect the identity of parents. So these were parents who approach clinical services. As I said, there is a lot of stigma that is linked to accessing parenting support. But also, as I say, I think part of the professional package and production was the plan to use the actors. But I must say, we had some feedback from parents who said, we'd like to hear stories from real parents who used the app, who found it helpful, and that may be something that could be introduced maybe in version 2.
So, then how far along has this trial been going? Or how long has it been going for?
The trial's been going on since May 2022, and it has been extremely successful. So I don't know whether you sort of have much knowledge about trial recruitment, but it can be very challenging because we are recruiting families from the clinical services. But in our case, recruitment has been phenomenal. So every month we are recruiting more than we planned. We are hoping to recruit before the deadline, which is very unusual for trials because usually they struggle. And we also have very good retention in the trial. So about 90% of parents who started with us remained. I think now we are following up. We started 9-month follow-up. So each parent stays in the trial for 12 months. So very soon we will start seeing the first families going for that 12-month follow-up in a couple of months. But it's been extremely successful. And I think it's because there is a lot of need. Parents really struggling with accessing support, but also when we design how we run the trial, we speak to parents a lot. So we have a parent panel who helps and supports the study, and we get a lot of brilliant advice from them about how to conduct the trial in a way that is parent-friendly.
And is this primarily for like children with higher support needs, or is it for all parents?
It is. So this is for children who are referred to the clinical service because they have either behavioral or emotional problems. And we screen. So one of the eligibility criteria to be able to take part in the trial is that children have to have high level of hyperactivity problems and high level of behavioral problems. But yes, these will be all children with clinical level needs. We did, during the COVID pandemic, run a trial in the general population. This was another parenting app called Parent Positive. And if you want to look up this study, it was called Sparkle. Supporting parents and children through lockdown experiences. And actually, I believe the animations that form the basis of the app were also, or are also, available in Australia. So I'll provide you with a link maybe after the session, so you can look it up. And anyway, so this was the app for parents in the general population. It was completely unstructured, so very different to STEPS, completely unstructured. And within this app, there were 3 zones. One, what we call the boosters, and these were 8 animations that sort of refer to the 8 key parenting challenges, and some quick tips for parents how to kind of get help with these challenges. There was a parenting exchange, which was a parenting forum where parents could chat to other parents in the trial. So again, that sort of sense of connection, sense of shared experience. But also parents had an opportunity to ask questions to experts in different aspects of child development. Things like sleep, play, neurodevelopmental difficulties. And these questions were then answered in a webinar that was posted, and the answers were posted in the app. And the final zone within the app was parenting resources, and they were links to other online resources that were vetted by us. So they were we tried to use reputable resources that parents could read a little bit more if they were interested in a certain topic. They wanted more specific support or advice on a certain topic. And again, the trial was phenomenal. Over 600 families were recruited in less than 3 months. So I think it's just a testament to the level of need. And actually, that digital interventions, that apps, is something that parents are willing to try, willing to test, and perhaps use to support their parenting.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's so cool to hear. Yeah. So I'm just curious how this fits into the sort of bigger picture of the British mental health system, which I don't know much about. So is there like this huge dire need in this area?
I think there is there is definitely an increase in demand. So I was recently looking at the data published by NHS Digital. So it's an organization that monitors the level of need. And in 2017, 1 in 9 children aged 7 to 16 had a probable mental health disorder. In 2022, this was 1 in 5. So 20% of children in the UK, according to the NHS Digital information, have a probable mental health disorder. At the same time, there is not enough workforce, clinical workforce, to support families, to support children. That's why there is I think, a lot of investment into the digital methods. And NICE, National Institute for Clinical Excellence, that provides guidelines in the UK, has very recently provided guidance on 4 new digital interventions for adolescent mental health. So this is, I think, the first time that actually NICE provided in its guidelines or directed people to digital interventions in their guidelines.
Well, with the need, are you the only program trying to look at mental health apps in the UK, or along with the NHS, or are there other studies going on as well?
There are quite a few studies in different areas. So we look specifically at parenting support. So that's the OPTIMA and Sparkle trials. But there is a lot of great work from Professor Kathy Creswell in Oxford, who is looking at support for families for emotional problems, and also for schools. Again, this is a digital platform. There is Professor Chris Hollis and team at the University of Nottingham that developed a digital intervention for tics. A trial is called Orbit, if you'd like to look it up. So I think there is quite a lot of different groups that are working in the UK on developing digital health interventions for different types of child and adolescent mental health disorders and problems, yes.
So do you think this will become a lot bigger in the future? Is this kind of the way forward in terms of digital mental health, not just for parenting, but I'm sure for lots of other issues as well?
I think it will, and I think one of the reasons is that there is this great demand and a gap in supply that we can't meet with sort of traditional in-person methods, and it creates a lot of difficulty for people who need this help, but also it's a big burden on the services. So if we can address some of less complex issues, or maybe if we can prevent or intervene early before problems become entrenched, then that frees up some of the time to deal with more complex cases. But also, I mean, digital methods have really transformed how we live. And on many sort of levels, they make our life so much easier. So why not maximize these opportunities for supporting mental health, for supporting development, supporting parenting? I think there is a lot of potential. I think what we really need to think about is how to help parents or young people incorporate these in their daily lives. You know, how we design them, that they are user-friendly, that they will be actually used, because there is a lot of literature, there's a lot of trials going on worldwide of digital, of apps, of platforms and so on, and one of the key issues is low engagement. And we are working very hard with parents in OPTIMA, with our parent panel to, so we monitor engagement very closely. So parents who are involved in the trial, we look how they use the app, and we're trying to think of ways how we can improve it. We continuously thinking of ways how we can improve it. There is nothing we can do really about the app at the moment because the trial is ongoing. But for example, we are just producing an animation that will provide some tips to parents of how to fit in the app in their daily lives. So those sort of emphasizing the parts of the design of the app, like the fact that people can just dip in and out, that each piece of the content is no more than 3 minutes long. That yes, you can use it while you're boiling the kettle. You can't go to a parenting group while you're boiling the kettle for your cup of tea or coffee, but you can use the app. So you can create these pockets of time during the day, but taking away from anything else and use the app. And I think this is what, especially with digital interventions, that's the area where we have to sort of think about ways how to engage people with using these tools that can be potentially really good, really helpful.
Can I ask then, how do you measure parents using the app correctly? Because you said it was very structured, but people can dip in and out. And do you know how they're actually implementing what they read or see?
Yes. So when parents give consent to take part in the trial, they also provide consent for us to look at their app usage data. And we record a lot of events. So we know when parents downloaded the app, on how many dates they used the app, how long they used the app for, which steps they used. There are sections within the app where parents can record their reflections, either by typing it in or a voice note. We don't have access to the reflections, that remains private, but we know whether a parent recorded it or not. We know what resources they used or opened. So we have a very, very detailed description for each parent, how they use the app. And again, this is something we worked with the app developer on setting up sort of a very good database for capturing all these events. And this is a great thing about digital interventions, sort of from a research point of view. When parents attend a parenting group, you just know that they turned up. That's all you know. And they might engage, but actually by monitoring their usage, we know very well what sections they might revisit, they might spend more time on, and sort of how we can optimize the app in the future to make it even more helpful, or where perhaps we should put a little bit more work to make it more relevant to parents and their experiences.
Something else that came to mind for me was, within the feedback that you've gotten, do you have any parents that just kind of say, actually, I'd really like to talk to someone or be part of a group? Do you find that some people, it doesn't quite meet their needs at all?
Actually, no. I mean, we've had feedback from parents who had experience with in-person parent training. And they say, well, I already know this. This is not new to me. But the Steps Up is for parents who are just been referred, just been accepted into the clinical service. So the assumption is that they are at the beginning of that pathway and they haven't had support in the past. So I think it might be different we haven't had anyone who said, well, I'd rather access support in person. But bearing in mind, parents volunteer to take part in the trial. So it might be a specific group that is open to receiving access in a digital format. And maybe if we could speak to parents who didn't express interest, but we don't know who they are, why you don't want to take part, it might be because they want to get help in an in-person format. That might be the reason for them not volunteering.
Yeah. So what keeps you really I'm interested on a personal level, what keeps you really engaged in this topic, or why did you sort of pick this area of interest?
I think, parenting, especially, I have 3 children. So I really wish I had an app when they were very young. Bear in mind, my eldest is now nearly 22. So this was well before Facebook, well before actually having access to online sources of support. And I think they, as parents, we all struggle. We all struggle, even with children who are neurotypical. It's a very challenging, probably one of the hardest things we ever do in life, bringing up a child. So we need any help we can get. And also, I think the looking for ways that we can improve parents' experience, it's really important for me, both at the level of maybe prevention of problems developing, but also helping parents who already are experiencing challenges when they are bringing up their child. So I think it's a mix of curiosity and sort of being able to potentially provide something that can be helpful to a large number of people.
Definitely, because I don't know what support would be like sort of back in the day. You might I don't know, before technology.
Ask the grandparents, I guess.
Grandparents.
Something like that.
But that's a really good point I think you are making. That's the way we live now. Families don't live close to the grandparents. So that support that parents might have had, from friends, grandparents, to the local community, doesn't exist probably to the same extent. At least I think in the UK, I'm not sure what it is like where you are, or maybe in other countries. But I think a lot of families move away from where the grandparents might live. So access to these sorts of sources of support is more limited. So we have to find new ways, digital grandparents.
Yes. Yeah. So what's kind of within the scope of the app? Does it sort of look at changing behaviour or sort of mental health? And yeah.
So it covers several areas. It starts with showing parents ways in how they can see themselves and their child in a more positive way. As you can imagine, it can be quite discouraging, it can be quite disheartening when your child displays challenging behavior. Then we show parents how important it is to look after themselves. And I know this is something very difficult for parents because we all want to do what's best for our children and focus on our children. But it's really important that parents also look after their own mental health and well-being. There are sections within the app that help parents communicating more clearly with their children, to communicate more clearly with their children, both in terms of conversations, but also teaching new skills. There are sections that highlight how important it is to praise children, to find what they do well and emphasize what they do well. Another section in the app highlights the importance of providing boundaries and structure within the families, so things like house rules, and how important it is that actually all members of the family agree on these house rules. Even if, for example, there is an extended family that is involved in bringing up a child, so it could be grandparents, aunties, uncles. There is also a section that talks about the importance of sort of careful use of sanctions. So that's the last resort, what can we do if nothing else works? How we, in a very careful and thoughtful way, think about sanctions. So that's sort of the main areas that are covered in the app. And there's each module, each step provides an explanation, evidence base behind the advice that is provided to parents, but also things that parents can apply. So very practical skills that they can try for themselves and their child. Because as one parent did tell us when we were discussing the app and what could be included in the app, they said, well, apps are all about application. So I want things that are practical, that I can try and implement with my family.
Cool. I'm interested to know a little bit about the demographics of the parents who are so far have taken part in your trial. So are there, considering UK so multicultural, and there's a lot of socioeconomic disparities as well, have your trial somewhat covered that so far?
It's a very good question, Sahir, and I'm really delighted to say that it is. We have a really sort of broad representation of families. So nearly 50% of parents taking part are single parents. About, I can't remember the exact breakdown in terms of demographics, but we have about over 20%, between 20 to 30%, obviously it changes from month to month, parents from ethnic minorities, which is actually more than the average in England. But a large part of our families are recruited from London, especially South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, which is a very multicultural area in London. And about, I think there is a mix of parents who have, so we definitely don't have the majority of parents with university education. So again, when you look at a lot of studies, probably 80% of parents have university degree, and that's definitely not the case. We have a quite broad range of education attainment. One thing we do, or we don't have actually, are dads. So most of parents who are taking part in the trial are mums. And there is a very simple reason for this, because when we invite parents to take part in the trial, we get given contact details of the main parent who is registered with the clinical service. And unfortunately, in most cases, these are mums. So it's not that we don't want dads to be included, or we're not trying. We just simply don't have access to dads. And it's still mums that look after medical appointments, and they are registered with the clinical services as well. So unfortunately, we do only have a very small number of dads in the trial.
Is it more beneficial to sort of have both parents on that learning journey? Can there be downsides if mum's learning this stuff and then dad's sort of on a different page?
So again, that's a very good point. We currently only the parent who is taking part in the trial has access to the app. I mean, there are sections within the app where parents can share content with someone else. So they can forward certain resources to their co-parent or a friend if they want to. But I think in an ideal situation, you probably would have access to for both parents so that they can work for the content of the app in their own time, but where both parents are included, yes. So I think that's possibly something to consider as a next step.
Yeah. So I guess what's the end goal of the app? So what do you would have hoped that parent would have learned by the end of all the stages?
So the main outcome that we are measuring in the trial is the level of child behavioral problems, so specifically oppositionality and defiance. So we are hoping that in the group that is using the app, those levels will reduce. We are also measuring emotional difficulties in a child. And in fact, in the Sparkle trial, so the trial that I mentioned that was done during the COVID, this is where we did see a difference between the group that did use the app and didn't use the app. So not behavior, but emotional problems. That was what the difference was. we are also hoping, so we are measuring things like parenting outcomes, so parenting efficacy, sort of parenting confidence. So we're hoping that this will improve. So I guess sort of general help, whether it's with child's behavior, we're hoping that the steps, will prove useful to the families, and that it will be cost effective, because that's another thing that we are measuring in the trials. Is the app cost effective?
Yeah.
I have one last question about this, and then we can talk about DIORA as well for a little bit. You mentioned a control group, or a group which did not take part in the app. How do you measure these? So are you in contact with the children as well?
No. So the control group is parents do not have access to the app during the trial, but they will get access to the app after 12 months. So all parents who are taking part in the OPTIMA trial will get access to the app. In terms of children's participation, we don't. So children participate in one aspect of the trial, which is parent-child task. So we're measuring, as I said, our key outcome of interest is oppositionality and defiance, and we're measuring it with questionnaires completed by parents, but we're also trying to capture it for an objective measure, which is during a task completed jointly by children and parents. And this task is done online. Children and parents, do you know the Etch-a-Sketch game?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
So it's an digital version of the Etch-a-Sketch game. And while children and parents do it, it's a little bit frustrating because it's a bit clunky. And while children and parents have to draw a picture, which is impossible to draw as well. So that's a little bit of a frustration there as well. We are recording a speech sample from the child to capture oppositionality. So that's another application of digital methods in research, which I think is very interesting. We are finding that most of child-parent pairs really enjoy this task, so I'm not sure if it's working, but we'll see. But in general, it's the parents who are participants in the trial.
Nice. Awesome. Olivia, did you have anything on?
No, I think you wanted to
That
ask more about the DIORA.
Yeah, it was just more in interest of time than anything else. So just moving on to your DIORA study, you mentioned at the very beginning that a lot of studies look at cross-sectional data, so they just take things at a time, and it has more to it. Could you just explain a bit how?
Sure. So a lot of the studies, so there is plenty of studies on this topic, plenty. But one, as I said, they just take a snapshot. And the second thing that is very commonly done is studies look at screen time as a measure of digital engagement. And I think we all agree that there is so much more to digital engagement than just the amount of time people spend online. Not to mention that it's really difficult to quantify exactly how much time we spend online. And in fact, again, we do have a young people's panel that is supporting our work on the DIORA project and advises us on the DIORA project. And one of the tasks we did with this young people's panel, we asked them to first tell us how much time do they think they spend online. And then we asked them to have a look on their phones and to see how much time they actually spend online. And these two numbers didn't really tally up. So it's very difficult to provide the exact sort of quantification of the time we spent online. And that was just on the phone. Young people have a variety of devices at their disposal. So that screen time measure is very blunt and it's not very good. So what we are doing in DIORA, we are trying to address both issues. So first of all, we have developed a very detailed and careful measure of digital engagement, which not only asks young people about different types of activities that they might be doing online, but also what sort of feelings these activities might induce. Because you can imagine, you may be looking at some cute animals on Instagram and feel really happy. You might be looking at heavily filtered images of influencers and feel really rubbish about yourself. And you are still using the same social media, you're still spending the same amount of time, but doing two different things that lead to very different feelings about yourself or more generally. And those feelings that you might be experiencing quite often eventually might sort of affect your mood and your mental health or your general well-being. So this is one aspect of the DIORA where we are going to capture and characterize digital activity in a very, very careful and detailed way. And the second aspect is we're not just going to take the snapshot. We are going to look at how both digital use and mental health is over time. So young people will complete measures, questionnaires, and provide information about their digital use over a 6-month period. Every several weeks they will complete these measures. So we can see, what are the relationships, how they develop over time, and hopefully, is it mental health that affects how we engage with our digital world, or is it the digital world that affects our mental health? I'm not saying we're going to answer these questions, but I think we are taking a really good first step to answering these questions.
That's very interesting. I like that question.
Yeah, me too. So I'm guessing there's no intervention per se. You're just following with your participants.
Yes, so this is very much an observational study. We're going to record what the participants are doing and how it makes them feel and how is their mental health, how is their well-being. We are also going to record quite carefully what's happening in their offline lives. Because again, our digital activity doesn't exist in a vacuum. Young people still go to school, young people have families, young people engage in leisure activities or don't engage in leisure activities in sort of the non-digital ways. So we are really going to try and build a complete picture of what's happening in young people's life, actually, to be able to understand this digital world more kind of deeply, I guess.
And is the data from that, is that meant to be like reflected back to the user so they can analyze it, or is it more for the purpose of like bigger scale analysis?
So I think what we probably will do, we will provide a general report to young people about what we found. I mean, as with any research study, I guess we would not look at the individual's data because it all has to be confidential. So we are more interested in looking at the group level. But I think we will provide a report. We will also most likely provide reports to schools because we will be recruiting young people for the study from secondary schools in England. And this is one area I think a lot of schools are interested in this relationship between digital use and their students' mental health. So I guess we would feed back our results in this way.
Yeah, I was about to say, due to ever since COVID, a lot of schools and a lot of
well, a lot of places have basically moved online, and a lot of screen time might actually be going towards things like that. So I really like how you're measuring very detailed aspects of of screen time itself.
Yes, you're right, because a lot of time that is spent online is spent on schoolwork. So actually, and I don't think, well, looking at my daughters now who are in secondary school, most of their homework is done online. And recently we had teacher strikes in England. So while teachers were striking, students stayed at home and had work set online to complete. So a lot of screen time is spent on educational activities or homework, and on positive activities, positive leisure activities as well. That's why we need to really be able to understand, what are the activities that might be less beneficial or harmful, but also what are the activities that might be positive to young people outside of the schoolwork.
I really want to ask this because in recent weeks we've seen the emergence and excessive use of artificial intelligence through, for example, ChatGPT. But that just shows to the nature with which online use keeps changing. And would your study kind of incorporate things like that into it as well?
We might capture some of these changes. What we will also do, in addition to questionnaires, which we obviously won't be able to change during the study, but we will follow up with people with qualitative interviews. So we will try to also invite a subsample of young people who take part in the study to tell us a little bit more, to provide more in-depth information. And I think that point about ever-changing technology is really important. It's not just that research is generally a quite slow process. So when you look at sort of gold standard RCT, it takes about 5 years to complete. So actually our Sparkle trial was exceptional in that regard, because we completed it in 11 months from start to finish. But we used an innovative design where we placed it in an existing cohort of families that were followed up during the pandemic, and we worked really hard. And as I said, we had phenomenal success with recruitment. But OPTIMA, where we're testing the steps up, is much slower. It's much closer to that traditional sort of RCT that takes a long time. During this time, technology will change, and we constantly sort of working. We have a developer that is constantly updating the application, because devices are changing, operating systems are changing, and so on. But as you said, in terms of other developments, artificial intelligence and all the kind of potential that it brings, also probably makes it harder, I guess, for young people and for us as researchers to navigate this very complex world. So it's exciting, but it is challenging.
Awesome. How are we doing for time, Sahir?
Well, it's 10:59. Kasia, if you're okay with a couple more questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
What about the recruitment for DIORA then? Because is there as quick an uptake as parents have had with the apps, or not really?
I can't answer this question just yet, because we've just received our ethical approval for the pilot study, and we will start recruiting after Easter. So I can't tell you, Sahir, how well we are doing, but ask me in 6 months. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed it's going to be as good. It's different. It's not an interventional study. And it's with a different group of people. It's with adolescents rather than their parents. So we'll see. But fingers crossed. We have a very experienced team. We have our young, as I said, something that we really, really value is the input of groups of people who are potential participants. So with parenting trials, we have parenting panels. With DIORA, we have parent composed of, I think, 8 young people who are aged 13 to 16. So the same demographic in terms of age that would be answering the questionnaires. And their role is to sort of keep us grounded and make sure that this study actually works for young people.
And what do you expect that you'll find, if I'm allowed to ask?
I really don't know. The answer is I really don't know. I think the pilot study is very much about testing our new measure, validating our new measure. As I said, it's a very careful measure of digital engagement. So I sincerely hope we find that it works. It's a valid measure. In terms of the longitudinal project that will follow, I hope we can identify aspects of digital use that are potentially harmful, more detailed characteristics of, and perhaps groups of people they are harmful for. That potentially could help us to intervene, again, develop interventions in the future.
An app for children.
Pardon?
An app for adolescents, then.
An app for another, yes. Or other forms of interventions that we could do, maybe in schools. Could be something simple like just education, but also practical tips. Again, it's all about giving people practical tools that could help them.
Excellent. Any more questions, Olivia?
Oh, I think that's great.
Should we quickly do some rapid fire questions then?
If I could remember a few, yes. I'll give it a go.
Yeah. Kasia, the last thing we do with everyone is we just ask them a few random rapid fire questions. Should take 2 or 3 more minutes, so we'll just rattle them off and you answer them as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go first.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Oh, I've got one. What's your least favourite kind of music?
I don't know. That's a really tough question. Possibly not classical music.
What is the ugliest fruit or vegetable?
Oh, they're all beautiful. No, that's unfair. I love fruit and veg. They're all beautiful.
What's the saying or phrase that people say that you think is BS?
With all due respect.
And then they disrespect.
No. Yeah. Don't like that phrase.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Travel in time.
When would you go back to? Or in the future?
I'd like to be able to hop between, different time scales. I think that'd be quite cool.
Yeah, so then you can check whether your trial worked or not.
Exactly. And what other digital developments are there around the corner?
If you could be an animal, what animal would you be?
A panda. They seem to have such a fun life.
So it's like they eat a lot and they sit around and sleep a lot.
Sounds really good.
the last question then is, if you had to leave us with any piece of advice, us, the audience, everyone with any piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it's about the balance. If we're talking about the digital world and non-digital world, I think there is place for everything in life, as long as it's used. We're trying to maximize what's good about this, and we're trying to balance it with things that we can do offline, like connecting to people offline, going out in nature offline. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kasia, for coming on. And we look forward to having you in another 6 to 8 months with results about OPTIMA and your pilot of DIORA.
Yeah, my pleasure. No, it's so OPTIMA will be going until 2024. As I said, it's a long project, but I'll be very happy to pop back and tell you what we found.
That'd be exciting. And if any listeners are in the UK and want to be part of these, where can they contact you?
So they could reach us at optima@kcl.ac.uk. But as I said, this trial is open just for parents who have been referred to the clinical services. But yes, or they can find me on KCL web pages.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening as well. And yeah, until next time, as Kasia said, it's all about balance.
Thank
Thanks.
Thank you.
you.